May 1942, the Pacific Ocean, Japanese admirals were celebrating. One American carrier was sunk and another USS Yorktown was so badly damaged that Japanese intelligence predicted it would be out of action for months. But something unbelievable was happening at Pearl Harbor. More than 1,400 workers were racing against time, working 72 hours without stopping to bring a dying warship back to life. Just days later, the carrier Japan thought was crippled forever suddenly appeared at Midway and helped destroy the most powerful carrier fleet on Earth. How did a ship that should have been dead change the course of World War II? May 27, 1942, 3:17 a.m., Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The sound never stopped. Hammers, riveters, grinding wheels, the crackle of welding torches. Even in the darkness, sparks showed across steel decks like orange rain. Floodlights turned the harbor into an artificial sunrise, and at the center of it all sat a wounded giant USS Yorktown. Her flight deck was scared, her hull was twisted, bulkheads were buckled from explosions. Men moved through her passageways carrying cables, steel plates, hoses, and toolboxes, faces streaked with sweat, hands black with grease. Nobody should have been working this hard on a ship that wasn't supposed to fight again anytime soon. But nobody had told the workers that, and nobody had told the Japanese. Thousands of miles away, officers of the Imperial Japanese Navy were already making calculations. They believed Yorktown was finished. Months of repairs, maybe longer. Certainly not a threat. Certainly not a ship they would have to face again. They were wrong, terribly wrong. And within days, that mistake would have decided the fate of the Pacific War. Only 19 days earlier, the Pacific Ocean had witnessed something the world have never seen before. A battle where the opposing fleets never saw each other. No battleships exchanging broadsides. No destroyers charging through gunfire. No admirals staring at enemy masts on the horizon. Instead, aircraft carried the war. The Battle of the Coral Sea, a new kind of naval combat, a terrifying glimpse into the future. For 4 days, American and Japanese carrier force hunted each other across thousands of square miles of ocean. Pilots searched endless waves. Radio operators strained to catch distant signals. Commander stared at maps covered in pins and grease pencil markings. One mistake could doom an entire fleet. One successful strike could erase a carrier from existence. And carriers were now the most valuable weapons on Earth. Among them stood Yorktown, a veteran already fast, deadly, feared. Commissioned in 1937, she represented a new era of American naval power, more than 800 feet long, capable of launching dozens of aircraft, a floating airfield carrying destruction across the Pacific. Her crew knew her strengths, they also knew her weaknesses. A carrier's greatest weapons was its aircraft. Its greatest vulnerability was also its aircraft fuel, bombs, aviation gasoline. One lucky hit could transform a warship into a floating inferno. Every sailor abroad understood that reality. Every launch carried risk. Every recovery carried danger. Yet they sailed into battle anyway because that was their job. And in early May 1942, the job became brutally expensive. The moving sky above Coral Sea was clear, too clear, perfect flying weather, perfect killing weather. Aircraft launched from both sides, engines roared, propellers blurred. Squadrons disappeared towards the horizon. Hours later, they found their targets. The Japanese light carrier Shosho became the first victim. American dive bombers screamed downward from the clouds. Bombs fell. Explosion erupted across the flight deck. Torpedoes slammed into her hull. Smoke billowed into the sky. Within minutes, the carrier was dying. American pilots radioed home. Scratch one flat top. The message spread across the fleet. Cheer erupted. A major victory, but the celebration wouldn't last because the Japanese still possessed powerful carrier forces and they were coming fast. The next day became chaos. Searching aircraft, misidentified targets, reports conflicted. Admiral struggled to understand a battlefield larger than some countries. Then came the strikes. The after waves, American aircraft hunted Japanese carriers, Japanese aircraft hunted American carriers. The ocean became a deadly chessboard, and Yorktown stood directly in the path of the storm. Shortly after noon on May 8, Japanese aircraft appeared overhead. Observers spotted them fast. Dark streaks against the sky, growing larger, growing faster. The warning is spread instantly. Air attack, general quarters, klaxons screamed. Sailors ran to battle station. Anti-aircraft guns swung towards the sky. You can almost feel the tension spreading through the ship. Every man knew what was coming. Every man had seen photographs of Pearl Harbor. Every man understood how quickly a carrier could die. The attackers split into groups. Dive bombers, torpedo bombers, fighter escorts, a carefully coordinated strike, the kind the Japanese had perfected through years of training. Yorktown began maneuvering violently. Hard turns, sudden acceleration, sharp changes of course. Captain Elliot Buckmaster fought his ship like a boxer, dodging punch. The ocean formed around the carrier. But there was only so much room to evade, only so much luck available. Then the bombs began falling. One missed, another missed, a third came down with terrifying precision. The explosion shocked the carrier. Steel bent, compartments flooded, equipment shattered, smoke rose into the air. The blast killed and wounded sailors instantly, but Yorktown kept moving. She was hurt, not dead, not yet. Then came the torpedo planes, low, fast, deadly. They skimmed across the ocean surface. Anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. Tracers screamed everywhere. Some attackers exploded into flames. Others pressed forward. One torpedo entered the water. Then another. White wake raced toward the carrier. The crew watched helplessly. There was nothing left to do but turn, pray, and hope. One torpedo missed, another missed. The ship shuddered as she escaped destruction by mere yards. When the attack ended, Yorktown remained a fluid damaged, scared, bleeding, but alive. For the American survival, heat like victory. For the Japanese, the battle seemed successful. Both sides had taken losses, but sides claimed achievements. But beneath the surface, the strategic picture was changing. The Japanese invasion of Port Moresby had been stopped. For the first time since the war began, imperial expansion had been checked. The advance wasn't unstoppable after all, yet the price had been served. The carrier Lexington, the Lady Lex, was gone, lost to fires and explosion after suffering catastrophic damage. One of America's most important carriers had vanished beneath the Pacific. Sailors watched from accompanying ships as the giant warship disappeared into the sea. Many wept openly, some stood silent, others simply stared. A symbol of American naval power had died before their eyes. Now only Yorktown remained, and she was badly wounded. As the battle ended, damage reports flooded in. Repair estimates looked grim. Flight deck damage, structural damage, electrical damage, internal damage. Experts believe full repairs would take months. That assessment wasn't unreasonable. In fact, It seems obvious no carrier could absorb punishment like that and return immediately to combat, at least not according to conventional wisdom. And conventional wisdom was exactly what the Japanese were counting on. In Tokyo and abroad, Japanese flagships intelligence officers began piecing together battle reports. The Americas had lost Lexington, Yorktown had been heavily damaged. They left only a handful of operational American carriers. The number looked favorable, very favorable. Admiral Isoroko Yamamoto was already preparing his next move, a massive operation, one designed to lure America's remaining carrier into a decisive battle, a trap, an enormous trap. The target was Midway atoll, a tiny peak in the Pacific, barely visible on most maps, but strategically priceless. If captured, Midway would extend Japanese defensive perimeter and threaten Hawaii itself. More importantly, Yamamoto believed the Americans would fight for it, and when they did, the Japanese carrier fleet would destroy them. The logic seemed flawless, especially because one critical enemy carrier appeared to be out of action, Yorktown. Japanese intelligence estimates suggested months of repairs, months, not days, not weeks, months. The calculation was entered into plans, into assumptions, into operational decisions. An invisible error was beginning to grow, and no one on the Japanese side realized it. Meanwhile, Yorktown limped toward Pearl Harbor. The voyage felt endless. Damage control teams worked constantly. Engineers inspected weakened systems. Medical personnel treated the wounded. The carrier's crew knew the rumors. Everyone knew Midway might be next. Everyone sensed something huge was approaching, but nobody expected what happened when they reached Hawaii, because waiting in Pearl Harbor was a decision that bordered on madness, a decision born from desperation, a decision that would become one of the most remarkable repair efforts in naval history. When senior officers examined Yorktown, they reached an astonishing conclusion. The ship didn't need to be perfect, she only needed to fight just long enough, just one more battle, and suddenly the impossible became the mission: repair a crippled aircraft carrier, not in months, not in weeks, but in days. The countdown had already begun, and somewhere beyond the horizon, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's powerful carrier force was steams our destiny, completely unaware that the carrier he thought was crippled was about to rise from the dead. The first thing in the inspectors noticed was the smell burn insulation, scotch paint, salt water, fuel, smoke, trapped deep inside steel compartments. It lingered in every corridor of USS Yorktown. The carrier had arrived at Pearl Harbor on May 27, 1942, looking far worse than the brief report suggested. As a distance, she still appeared operational. Up close, the damage told a different story: twisted metal, shattered equipment, buckled frames, bomb damage reaching into critical section of the ship. Teams from the Pearl Harbor naval shipyard moved aboard almost immediately. Clipboards appeared, measurements were taken, hatches were opened. Engineers disappeared into damaged compartments carrying flashlights and notebooks. Every minute mattered. The Japanese fleet was already moving. Nobody knew the exact date of the next battle, but intelligence reports indicated something enormous was coming. And if Yorktown missed it, America might face the Imperial Japanese Navy with dangerously few carriers. The situation was grim. The assessment team worked rapidly, then they delivered their findings. Under normal circumstances, complete repairs would require approximately 3 months. 3 months. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 3 months meant Yorktown would miss Midway. 3 months meant American carrier strength would be severely reduced. 3 months might alter the carrier course of the Pacific War. Admiral Chester Nimitz listened carefully. The commander of the Pacific Fleet had heard enough bad news since Pearl Harbor to last a lifetime. But he also understood something many others didn't. The coming battle would not wait for perfect conditions. There would be no second chance, no convenient delay, no pause button. The fleet either fought with Yorktown or fought without her, and fighting without her was a risk Nimitz was unwilling to accept. So he asked a simple question: how much can you do in 3 days? For a moment, the room was silent. 3 days, not 3 weeks, not 3 months, 3 days. The request sounded impossible, yet impossible tasks had become common since December 17. America had spent nearly 6 months reacting to disasters. Now there was an opportunity to strike back. The shipyard workers understood that, and so did the officers. The answer came back: not perfect repairs, not permanent repairs, but enough to fight, enough to launch aircraft, enough to survive one more battle, enough. That was all Nimitz needed to hear. The order was given, and Pearl Harbor exploded into action. Within hours, the shipyard became a machine operating at maximum speed. More than 1,400 workers flooded aboard. Yorktown welders, electricians, pipe fitters, engineers, machinists, riggers, painters, damage control specialists, men who had already spent months repairing ships destroyed during the attack on Pearl Harbor. Many of them were exhausted. Many had barely seen their families. None of them cared. They knew exactly what was at stake. Floodlights illuminated every section of the ship. Work continued through the night and through the next night and the one after that, 24 hours a day. No pauses, no delays, no excuses. The carrier became a floating construction site. The sound was deafening: metal cutting, steel hammering, generators roaring, voices shouting over machinery. The sparks flew continuously. Workers climbed through compartments carrying replacement parts. Others crawled into spaces too tight they could barely turn around. Some sections were still dangerously damaged. Others was partially flooded. Nobody stopped. Nobody slowed down, because somewhere across the Pacific, a Japanese fleet was approaching, and every hour lost in Pearl Harbor was an hour gained by the enemy. The most visible wound was the hole in Yorktown's flight deck. Japanese bombs had ripped through critical areas. The deck was the carrier's runway, its battlefield, its reasons for existing. Without a functioning flight deck, Yorktown was simply a giant target floating in the ocean. Repair crews attacked the problem immediately. Steel plates were brought aboard, cut, measured, welded, fitted into place. Massive cranes moved equipment day and night. Workers balanced high above the harbor while welding damaged sections together. The heat was intense. The pace was relentless. There was no room for mistakes. Every weld mattered, every bolt mattered, every inch of repaired steel could mean the difference between launching aircraft or losing them. One worker later remembered barely sleeping. Another recalled eating meals while standing because there wasn't enough time to sit. Coffee flowed constantly, cigarettes burned continuously. The entire shipyard seemed powered by urgency and fear, not fear of failure, fear of arriving too late. Below the flight deck, conditions were even worse. Bomb blasts had damaged internal systems throughout the carrier. Electrical cables hung loose. Ventilation systems were compromised. Pipes were ruptured. Bulkhead had been wrecked by explosions. Repair crews disappeared into the ship's deep. How can almost imagine the atmosphere? Narrow passageways illuminated by portable lamps, the smell of hot metal, the sound of tools echoing through a steel corridor, men working shoulder to shoulder inside compartments barely large enough for a few people. Some repairs were temporary by necessity. There simply wasn't enough time. Engineers' priorities compact effectiveness over perfection. Could the system operate? Good. Move on. Could the aircraft launch? Good. Move on. Could the ship survive battle? Good. Move on. Every decision focused on a single objective. Get Yorktown back into the fight. Nothing else mattered. Meanwhile, intelligence officers delivered increasingly alarming reports. American code breakers had achieved something extraordinary. Months of pain stacking work had begun unlocking portions of Japanese naval communications. Analysts were reading fragments of enemy plans. The picture emerging from those messages was disturbing. A major operation was coming, and Midway appeared to be the target. The information flowed directly to Nimitz. Every new report increased the urgency. Every decoded message reinforced the same conclusion. The battle was approaching fast, very fast. Without Yorktown, American carrier force would be dangerously outnumbered. With Yorktown, they at least had a fighting chance, a chance that single word justified every sleepless night at Pearl Harbor. As workers battled the clock, Yorktown's crew joined the effort. Sailors repaired their own ship. They cleared compartments, moved equipment, assisted engineers, repaired aircraft spaces, loaded supplies. Many had survived Coral Sea only weeks earlier. Some still carried injuries. Others had lost friends. Yet nobody talked about rest. Nobody talked about staying behind. The crew wanted their ship back, and they wanted revenge. The loss of Lexington remained fresh in their minds. The images lingered. The flames, the explosions, the final movement before the carrier slipped beneath the wave. Every sailor understood the reality of carrier warfare. Tomorrow could be their turn, but that possibility only strengthened their resolve. If Yorktown was heading back into battle, they intended to be abroad here. The pressure intensified with every passing hour. Admiral Nimitz visited the carrier. Senior officers inspected progress. Repair team provided updates, and slow, almost unbelievably, the impossible began to happen. The ship was coming back to life. Lights returned, systems activated, machinery started functioning again. Damaged sections became operational. Flight deck repair advanced rapidly. The carrier still wasn't perfect. Far from it, a detailed inspection would reveal countless shortcuts and temporary solutions, but perfection had never been the goal. Combat readiness was getting closer, hour by hour, minute by minute. The transformation tuned every some of the experts involved. 3 months of work had been compressed in 2 days. Nobody knew if it would be enough. Nobody could guarantee Yorktown would survive another battle, but survival wasn't the mission. The mission was to fire. Fire to the west. Admiral Shuichi Nagumo remained confident. His powerful carrier strike force represented the finest concentration of naval aviation on Earth. 4 fleet carriers, veteran air crews, elite pilots, experienced commanders. These were the same forces that had devastated Pearl Harbor, the same forces that had conquered vast portions of the Pacific. Japanese planners believed they understood the enemy situation. They expected to face American carriers, just not Yorktown. Certainly not Yorktown. The carrier had been damaged at Coral Sea. Japanese reports confirmed it. Photographs suggested extensive destruction. Repair estimates seemed obvious. Months. Everyone agreed. Months. The assumption quietly spread throughout planning discussions. No one challenged it. No one suspected that while Japanese carrier crossed the Pacific, 1,400 American workers were racing against time beneath the floodlights of Pearl Harbor. No one imagined a triple carrier being rebuilt in 72 hours. The idea sounded absurd, which is exactly why it was so dangerous. They came the final inspection, the final test, the final preparations. Workers stood aside as critical system operated successfully. Aircraft facilities were evaluated, damage control capabilities were reviewed. The ship wasn't fully repaired. Everyone knew that, yet she was operational enough. The verdict reached. Nimitz Yorktown could sail. For a brief moment, the impossible achievement sank in. 3 days, just 3 days. A carrier expected to require months of repair was preparing for combat. It was one of the most extraordinary emergency repair efforts in naval history, but the workers weren't celebrating, not yet, because their job wasn't truly finished. The real test waited beyond the harbor. The Pacific would decide whether work hard succeed, and on the morning Yorktown prepared to leave Pearl Harbor, a question lingered. Every sailor, every repairman, and every officer involved. Had they just saved a ship, or had they just sent thousands of men back into a battle they could not possibly survive? Ahead lay Midway, ahead lay Nagumo, ahead lay destiny, and neither side yet understood how close they were to colliding. The morning sun rose over the Pearl Harbor on May 13, 1942. The harbor looked peaceful, almost too peaceful. The water shimmered beneath the Hawaiian sky. Mountains stood silently in the distance. A casual observer might have believed the Pacific calm. It wasn't. Beneath that calm surface, one of the most important naval confrontation in history was already unfolding, and at the center of it was a ship that should not have been there. USS Yorktown. The carrier eased away from her berth. Lines were cast off, tugs mean over carefully. Sailors leaned the rail. Workers from the shipyard stopped to watch. Many of them had spent the previous 72 hours inside the carrier's steel skeleton. They knew every patch, every temporary weld, every emergency repair. They knew exactly how fragile the situation was. As Yorktown moved toward open water, some workers waved, others simply stared. There was pride, but there was also uncertainty, because nobody knew if they would ever see the ship again. The carrier's crew certainly stood the risk. The damage hadn't magically disappeared. The repair had been extraordinary, but they had also been rushed. Some systems remained vulnerable. Certain compartments still showed evidence of corrosion. The ship carried scars, real scars. Yet as the Hawaiian coastline faded behind them, the mood aboard Yorktown began to change. The carrier was no longer a patient. She was once again a warship, a flight ship, and sailors understood fighting ships have only one purpose: to seek the enemy. The engine pushed steadily westward. The Pacific stretched endlessly ahead. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Japanese carriers were moving in the same direction. Neither side could see the other, not yet, but every mile brought them closer. The race was now underway, not a race of speed, a race of intelligence, a race of prediction, a race to strike first. A Pearl Harbor Admiral Chester Nimitz sat at the center of a growing web of information. What made the coming battle different wasn't merely the ship involved. It was the knowledge. Months earlier, American capitalists had begun cracking portions of Japan's naval code. The work had been exhausting, tedious, often frustrating, yet gradually piece of the puzzle emerged. Fragments become patterns, patterns become understanding. One location repeatedly appeared in Japanese communication, a mysterious target, designed AF. Analysts debated its identity. Was it Hawaii? What if another island? What if Midway? The answer mattered enormously because if AF was Midway, Nimitz would prepare an ambush. If it was an American carrier, would be sent to the wrong location and the consequences would be catastrophic. Then intelligence officer devised a clever test. Midway was instructed to transmit an uncoded radio message reporting a shortage of fresh water. Shortly afterward, Japanese communication reported that AF was experiencing water shortages. The mystery vanished instantly. AF was Midway. The trap had been revealed. Now the question became whether America could spring a trap of its own. For the first time since the war began, the United States possessed a significant advantage: knowledge, not complete knowledge, not perfect knowledge, but enough. Nimitz knew roughly, yet the Japanese intended to strike. He knew approximately when they would arrive. Most importantly, he knew they expected to find weakened American forces. Japanese commanders believed they were setting an ambush. In reality, they were sailing towards one. The irony was remarkable. The Imperial Japanese naval had spent months dominating the Pacific. Victory followed victory. Pearl Harbor, Wake Island, the Philippines, the Dutch East Indies, Malaya, Singapore. Each operation reinforced a growing belief Japanese naval superiority seemed unquestionable. Many officers began viewing American resistance as increasingly desperate. That confidence wasn't entirely unreasonable. The Japanese fleet was magnificent. Its carrier force was unmatched. Its pilots were among the best in the world. Its commander possessed extensive combat experience. Yet confidence can become dangerous, especially when it evolves into certainty, and certainty was beginning to infect Japanese planning. Aboard the flagship of the First Air Fleet, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo reviewed preparation. The operation appeared straightforward: capture Midway, destroy American carrier. When they responded, expand Japan's defensive perimeter, secure strategic dominance. Everything seemed logical, everything seemed achievable. What Nagumo didn't know was that one critical assumption had already failed. Yorktown, the carrier, wasn't supposed to be here. Japanese intelligence believed she remained crippled, out of action, months from combat readiness. The conclusion seemed supported by evidence. After all, Coral Sea had inflicted substantial damage. No enemy could repair such destruction so quickly. No navy, except perhaps one fighting for survival. And so while Nagumo organized his forces, Yorktown slipped silently toward Midway, a cruise ship, unexpected participant, a weapon the enemy believed absent. The advantage might seem small: one carrier, one fight deck, one air group, but war had turned on less, much less. The journey went gave crew time to prepare. Aircraft maintenance intensified. Pilots studied maps. Briefings multiplied. Weapons were inspected repeatedly. The atmosphere aboard Yorktown became increasingly focused, increasingly tense. Pilots understood they were approaching something historic. They didn't know exactly what, but they sensed it. The Pacific Fleet had concentrated nearly every available carrier. The fact alone revealed the stakes. Americans simply didn't possess many fleet carriers in 1942. Every lost hurt, every surviving carrier mattered. Yorktown, Enterprise, Hornet, that was it. Those three carriers represented the striking power standing between the United States and further Japanese expansion. Lose them and the Pacific would change dramatically. Win and the momentum of the war might shift. The stake could hardly have been higher. The air groups aboard the carrier reflected the rapidly evolving nature of naval warfare. Fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers. Each had a role, each carried immense responsibility. The fighter pilots flew German F-4F Wildcats, sturdily aircraft, not as agile as the Japanese Zero, not as elegant, but durable, dependable, capable of absorbing punishment that would destroy. Lighter aircraft, the dive bombers carried perhaps the deadliest weapons in naval aviation: precision. When properly executed, a dive bombing attack would place a bomb directly onto a carrier stack. One hit might ignite fuel, two hits might cripple operation. Three hits could sink a ship. Torpedo squadron faced the most dangerous job of all, flying low at slow, straight towards enemy anti-craft fire. Every pilot knew the odds. Every pilot climbed into the cockpit away. As Yorktown moved west, another battle unfolded far above the ocean, a battle of reconnaissance. The Pacific was vast, almost unmanageable. Was finding an enemy fleet often resembled searching for a needle in an ocean-sized haystack. Both sides launched scouting aircraft. Both sides attempted to locate the other first, because in carrier warfare, detection often means survival. The fleet that found its enemy first really struck first, and the fleet that struck first frequently won. Every commander understood that question. Every escort pilot carried the weight of history on his shoulders. Once accurate sighting reports could determine the outcome of an entire campaign. One missed contact could doom thousands of men. The pressure was immense, yet neither side had achieved contact. Not yet. The Pacific still concealed its secret. Night fell repeatedly as the fleets approached each other. One Yorktown sailors scattered quietly during brief moments of rest. Some played cards, others wrote letters. Many stared into darkness. The ocean at night felt endless, black, silent, unpredictable. You can almost picture those young sailors leaning against railing, listening to waves strike the hull, wondering what awaited them, wondering whether they would see home again. Most were barely adults, yet within days they would participate in one of the most consequential naval battles ever fought. Few realized it at the time. History rarely announces itself in advance. It simply arrives and demands decision. June 3rd approached, then June 4th. The distance between the fleets shrank. The tension increased. Somewhere ahead, Japanese carrier prepared aircraft. Somewhere ahead, Japanese pilots reviewed attack plans. Somewhere ahead, Admiral Nagumo remained unaware that Yorktown was coming, unaware that Pearl Harbor's repair miracle had fundamentally altered the battlefield. One carrier, just one, but that single carrier changed American strength by 50%. Without Yorktown, only Enterprise and Hornet would face the enemy. With Yorktown, Nimitz possessed 3 fleet carriers, 3 opportunities to strike, 3 flight decks, 3 aircraft, 3 chances. The mathematics of war had shifted, and the Japanese didn't know it, not yet. Then, as dawn approached over the Pacific, lookouts scanned the horizon. Engines rumbled below decks, pilots prepared equipment, radio operators monitored frequencies. The atmosphere became electric. Something was about to happen. Everyone could feel it. The waiting phase was ending. The searching phase was ending. The collision was coming. Soon escort aircraft would lift into the sky. Soon fleet would be located. Soon bombs and torpedoes would begin their deadly work. And when Japanese commanders finally discovered that Yorktown was present at Midway, their surprise would be profound, but an even greater shock awaited them, because the Americans were not merely present, they were waiting. And above the Pacific on the morning of June 4, 1942, the first sightseeing reporters began arriving. The hunt was over, the battle was about to begin. The carrier decks glowed beneath dim blue lights, aircraft engines called to life, mechanics gave final hand signals. Pilots climbed into cockpits, the sea was calm, the sky was beginning to brighten, and somewhere beyond the horizon, two fleets were preparing to kill each other. Aboard the Japanese carrier, the moon was confident, professional, disciplined. The first air fleet, the famous WWII, remained the most feared naval strike force in the world. Four fleet carriers, Akaji, Kaka, Soryo, Hirio, together they had devastated Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier. Together they had swept across the Pacific like an unstoppable storm. Their pilots were veterans, their commanders experienced, their reputation unmatched. To many Japanese officers, Midway appeared to be another step toward victory, difficult perhaps, but manageable. The Americans had been weakened repeatedly, their carrier force seemed limited, their morale uncertain. Most importantly, Japanese planners still believed Yorktown remained out of action. That assumption continued quietly shaping their expectation, and assumptions that was now about to collide with reality. At precisely 4:30 am, aircraft began launching from the Japanese carriers, one after another, then another, and another. The roar became continuous. Attack plans surged into the dawn sky. Their mission was straightforward: strike Midway atoll, destroy airfield, neutralize defense, prepare the island for invasion. The operation appeared routine, yet beneath the surface, problems were already emerging because Admiral Nagumo faced a dilemma. His aircraft were heading toward Midway, but his reserve strike force remained aboard the carrier. If American ships appeared unexpectedly, those reserve aircraft might need to attack them instead. It was a classic command problem. How do you prepare for multiple possibilities simultaneously? Nagumo believed he had time. He believed he could adopt as events developed. That belief would prove fatal. Meanwhile, Midway was awake. Radar operators had detected incoming aircraft. Warning spread repeatedly. Pilots scrambled. Anti-aircraft crew rushed to their position. The island braced for impact. Moments later, Japanese aircraft arrived. The attack was devastating. Bombs exploded across installation. Buildings erupted into flames. Runways suffered damage. Smoke climbed into the sky. Yet something important happened. Midway survived. The airfield wasn't knocked out. Defense was not eliminated. Aircraft continued operating. The island remained dangerous. Japanese strike leaders recognized the problem immediately. Their reports back to Nagumo carried a clear recommendation: a second attack would be necessary. Midway had not been neutralized. That message set a chain reaction in motion, one that would eventually destroy an empire's greatest weapon. Back aboard Akaji, Nagumo received the report. The island required another strike. Simple enough, he ordered reserve aircraft prepared for a second attack against Midway. Bombs were brought out. Weapons crew began configuring aircraft. Hangar decks became hive of activity. Fuel houses connected to planes. Bomb carts rolled between rows of aircraft. Torpedoes were moved aside. New weapons loaded. The process took time, and time was becoming increasingly precious because at almost the exact momentum Nagumo made his decision, another message was racing toward him from the Pacific sky. A scout plane had spotted American ship. At first, the report was incomplete, confusing, frustratingly vague. Then additional information arrived. Enemy naval force were present, possibly carriers, possibly. The word changed everything. Suddenly, Nagumo faced a nightmare. His reserve aircraft were halfway through rearming. Weapons lay scattered throughout hangars. Fuel lines connected aircraft. Crews rushed in multiple directions. The carefully organized strike force was now caught between missions: attack Midway, attack American ship, prepare for both. Every option carried risk, every minute increased danger, and somewhere nearby, American aircraft were already heading toward him. At Yorktown, the atmosphere was entirely different. There was no confusion, no uncertainty about the objective. Find the Japanese carrier, destroy them. Pilots gathered for briefings, map spread across tables. Estimated enemy positions were discussed. The orders were clear. This was the opportunity everyone had been waiting for. Months of retreat, months of defeat, months of reacting. Now finally came a chance to strike. The pilot listened carefully. Many were young, many were frightened. Yet beneath the anxiety existed determination. The Japanese carrier force represented the heart of enemy naval power. If those carriers could be damaged or sunk, the entire Pacific War might change. Every pilot understood the significance, every pilot knew the risk, and every pilot climbed into his aircraft away. Soon American planes began launching. The process seemed endless. Aircraft rolling forward, engines screaming. One by one they disappeared into the sky. From Yorktown, from Enterprise, from Hornet, wave after wave came into the morning air. Then they scattered across the vast Pacific. The challenge was enormous. The ocean offered few landmarks. Navigation errors were common. Fuel calculations were critical. A pilot could easily become lost forever. Many did. Yet the search continued. Hundreds of miles from Midway, both sides were now hunting each other simultaneously. Two powerful carrier forces moving toward collision. Two groups of aviators searching desperately. Two fleets racing against time. The first American attacks went badly, very badly. Torpedo squadrons reached the Japanese carrier first. The men flying them displayed extraordinary courage and suffered horrific losses. Their aircraft were outdated, slow, vulnerable. As they approached the Japanese fleet, Zero fighters descended upon them. The result was slaughter. Planes exploded, aircraft plunged into the sea. Crews vanished into smoke and fire. The attacks achieved almost nothing. Tactically, torpedoes missed, ships survived, entire squadrons were virtually wiped out. Yet those sacrifices accomplished something nobody realized at the time, something increasingly important. The tracked Japanese fighter covered down to sea level, far away from the altitude where danger was approaching. Above the battle, thousands of feet higher, American dive bombers searching desperately. Fuel gauges dropped. Pilots scanned endless ocean. Many feared they had missed the enemy entirely. Became one of the most consequential moments of the war. Commander Clarence McCluskey of Enterprise faced a difficult choice. Size time was running out, fuel was becoming critical. He could turn back or continue. Many commanders would have chosen caution. McCluskey didn't. He noticed the wake of lone Japanese destroyer speeding across the ocean. The ship appeared to be rushing somewhere important. McCluskey followed it. The decision lasted only moments, but history often hangs on moments because the destroyer was returning into the Japanese carrier force and unknowingly it led the Americans directly to their prey. Then suddenly there were four Japanese carriers visible below, almost unbelievably. The timing was catastrophic for the Japanese aircraft. Crowded hangars, fuel hoses remained connected, bombs and torpedoes were scattered throughout preparation area. Deck operations were underway. Fighters were at low altitude. dealing with torpedo attacks. The carriers had been caught at exactly the wrong moment, a perfect storm, a perfect opportunity. The American dive bombers rolled into attack, noses pointed downward, airspeed increasing rapidly. The ocean rushed upward, pilot focused on tiny carrier deck fall below. Anti-aircraft fire erupted. Black bursts filled the sky, yet the bombers keep diving closer, closer, closer. Then bombs released. The next 5 minutes would shock the world, and when the smoke cleared, three of Japanese greatest carrier would be burning from end to end. The balance of power in the Pacific was about to shift forever, but one Japanese carrier remained untouched, and before the day ended, that surviving carrier would finally discover the truth. The carrier everyone believed crippled, the carrier everyone believed absent, the carrier repaired in 72 impossible hours. USS Yorktown, and Harry was already preparing to strike. The sky above the Japanese fleet erupted into fire at approximately 10:22 a.m. The impossible happened within minutes. Three of the most powerful carriers on Earth were transformed into floating infernos: Akagi, Kaga, Soryo, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the ship that had helped shatter the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, the ships that had carried Japan from victory to victory across the Pacific. Now they were burning violently, catastrophically. The American dive bombers had struck at exactly the right moment. Bombs punched through flight deck, explosion ripped through hangars, fuel ignited instantly, aircraft loaded with bombs because secondary explosive torpedo detonated, flames raced through enclosed space. War began as bombs damage quickly became something far worse, uncontrollable destruction. Japanese sailors fought desperately. Damage control teams charged into smoke-filled compartments. Fire hoses spread endlessly. Officers shouted orders. Wounded men stumbled across a scorching steel deck, but some fires cannot be defeated. Some moments arrive too suddenly, too violently, too perfectly, and this was one of them. The mighty First Air Fleet had been crippled in less than 10 minutes, yet the battle wasn't over, not even close, because one carrier remained operational. Hiryu, far from the burning chaos surrounding her sister ships, far enough away to escape the American attack. When reports arrived abroad, Hiryu, this belief spread throughout the command staff. 3 carriers hit 3. The information sounded impossible. The First Air Fleet had dominated every major naval action of the war. Now its score appeared shattered. For a moment, confusion regained the game determination. If Hiryu still possessed aircraft, then Hiryu could still fight. And if she could still fight, she could still win. Admiral Ramon Yamaguchi understood that perhaps more clearly than anyone else. Aggressive, brilliant, fearless, Yamaguchi refused to accept defeat. He immediately ordered a counterattack, find the American carrier, destroy them, restore the balance. The battle outcome now depended upon speed. Who could strike first? Who could strike hardest? Who could survive? Abroad Yorktown, no one yet realized the full scale of the American success. Reporters arrived slowly, often incomplete. Pilots returned with dramatic stories, the smoke columns, direct hits, burning carriers, yet confirmation remained uncertain. The fog of war obscured everything. But the crew did know was this: the Japanese still had at least one operational carrier. That means danger remained very real. The ship repaired atop accordingly. Fighter refueled, anti-aircraft crew stood ready. Damage control parties checked equipment repeatedly. The crew had survived Coral Sea. They understood exactly what a Japanese carrier strike could do. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the strike was already coming. Hiryu aircraft launched quickly. The Japanese pilot faced enormous pressure. The battle's momentum had shifted. The reputation of the Imperial Navy was suddenly under threat. success was no longer desirable, it was essential. The aircraft speed eastward over the Pacific, searching, scanning, hunting. Then came the sickening report, an American carrier. The excitement approached the Japanese planes was immediate. The enemy had been found. Now came the hard part, reaching it alive. Shortly before noon, lookout aboard Yorktown spotted aircraft approaching. Moments later, radar operators confirmed the threat. Japanese planes incoming. The warning raced through the carrier, general quarters, battle stations. Every sailor moved instantly. Every man knew his assignment. Every man knew what was coming. The carrier turned sharply. Anti-aircraft guns swung skyward. Fighters scrambled to intercept. The sense field, hauntingly familiar. Only a week earlier at Coral Sea, Yorktown had endured exactly this situation. Now it was happening again, but this time the stakes were even higher because there was no Lexington beside her, no second chance, no margin for error. The Japanese attack arrived with remarkable precision. Dive bombers descended from altitude. Their pilot focused intensely on the carrier below. Yorktown maneuvered violently. Her caption ordered hard turns. The ship zigzagged across the ocean. Foamy waves stretched behind her. For a few moments, it seemed the evasive action might succeed. Then the bombs began falling. One missed, another missed, then a direct hit. The explosion rocked the carrier, still twisted. Smoke erupted upward. Moments later, another bomb struck. The deck shook violently. Men were thrown from their feet. Fire broke out in multiple areas. Sharpened torn through equipment and personnel alike. The attack was devastating, but something remarkable happened. Yorktown survived. Aging damage control team responded instantly. Crew attack fires. Engineer restored system. Within an astonishingly short period, the carrier appeared operational once more. Japanese pilots observing from above were stunned. They reported the carrier heavily damaged, possibly sinking. Yet when they departed, Yorktown remained underway, still moving, still fighting, still alive. Back abroad, Harry, the report sounded encouraging. The American carrier appeared mortally wounded, perhaps destroyed. The strike seemed successful, but Japanese commander wanted certainty. One damaged carrier wasn't enough. The enemy needed to be finished, so a second strike was prepared. Torpedo bombers, experienced crews, a lethal follow-up attack. If the first blow had crippled Yorktown, the second would sink her. At least that was the expectation. The torpedo planes arrived during the afternoon. Once again, Yorktown prepared for battle. The crew knew this attack could be decisive. Torpedoes represented a different threat entirely. Bomb damage, torpedoes killed. The low-flying attackers approached across the water. Anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. Explosions surrounded the incoming aircraft. Several Japanese planes fell burning into the ocean. Others pressed forward, determined, relentless, professional. The torpedoes dropped. White wake streaked toward the carrier. Captain Elliot Buckmaster ordered emergency turns. The ship leaned dramatically. Water surged along the hull. For a moment, it appeared Yorktown might evade the attack. Then disaster struck. Two torpedoes slammed into the carrier's side. The explosions were enormous. The entire ship seemed to jump. Power freight machinery stopped. Compartments flooded rapidly. The list became obvious almost immediately. This time the damage was severe, very severe. The crew fought desperately, but the situation deteriorated quickly. Eventually the order came. Abandoned ship, thousands of sailors came into life. rafts, and boats. Others entered the water. Many looked back at their carrier with heavy hearts. The ship that had survived Coral Sea, the ship repaired in 72 hours, the ship that wasn't supposed to be a Midway. Now it appeared doomed. And yet even Yorktown refused to surrender. Hours passed, then more hours, still she floated. The list remained serious, the damage extensive, but the carrier stayed stubbornly above water. American salvage team soon returned. Engineer reported the vessel. Damage control effort resumed. Amazingly, there appeared to be a chance to save her. Once again, Yorktown seemed determined to defy expectations, to survive, to endure, to fight against fate itself. Meanwhile, far away from the crippled carrier, another drama was unfolding. American research aircraft had finally located Hiryu, the last surviving Japanese carrier, the final threat, the final opportunity. Dive bombers were already heading towards her, the same deadly aircraft that had destroyed Akagi, Kaga, and Torio. Now they were coming for Hiryu, and before the sun set on June 4th, the Japanese carrier that had struck Yorktown would join her sister in flame. The battle was reaching its climax, but the greatest irony of all was only now becoming clear. The carrier Japanese intelligence believed absent had observed the attention of an entire enemy-like force. The carrier repaired in 72 hours and changed the battle's mathematics, changed its decisions, changed its outcome, and soon Japanese commanders would fully understand the cost of their mistakes. Late afternoon, sunlight stretched across the Pacific. The ocean appeared calm again, almost peaceful. But beneath that calm surface floated burning wreckage, shattered aircraft, and the consequences of decisions that would echo through history. The Battle of Midway was nearing its conclusion, yet many of the men involved still didn't understand what had happened. Not completely, not yet. They knew ships were burning, they knew aircraft had been lost, they knew thousands of lives had changed forever, but the true significances of the battle would only become clear with time, because June 4th, 1942 was more than a victory. It was a turning point, a moment when the momentum of an entire war began to shift, and remarkably, one of the key reasons for that shift was a carrier the enemy belief wasn't there. USS Yorktown, after surviving the morning catastrophe, Hiryu had become Japan's last operational fleet carrier. Her crew understood the situation. The burden resting upon their ships was immense. Everything now depends on them. Everything. The American carriers had already struck devastating blows. 3 Japanese carriers were burning uncontrollably. The first air fleet had been gutted. Only Hiryu remained. If she survived, Japan retained hope. If she failed, the battle was effectively lost. The responsibility weighed heavily on everyone abroad. Pilots launched aircraft, claimed defense prepared, but the Americans were already coming again. The dive bombers appeared late in the day. Veterans now, men hundreds by hours of combat, they located Hiryu and began their attack. The Japanese carrier, being everywhere aggressively, anti-aircraft guns opened fire. Blackbirds filled the sky. The defenders fought courageously, but coverage alone cannot stop gravity. It cannot stop bombs already falling. American aircraft rolled into their dives. The attack was precise, relentless, deadly. Bombs slammed into Hiryu. Explosions erupted across the flight deck. Fuel ignited. Aircraft caught fire. Flames spread repeatedly. Within minutes, the carrier was suffering the same fate that had consumed Akaji, Kaga, and Soryu. Smoke clearing thousands of feet into the air. The last striking arm of the first air fleet had been broken. The battle was decided. Japan had lost 4 fleet carriers. 4. The number was staggering, almost unimaginable. These were unmerely ships, they were elite combat formations, floating airfields, centers of experience, repositories of skill. Each carrier represented years of training and preparation. Each carrier's veteran pilot who could not easily be replaced. The losses were far beyond steel. They stuck at the heart of Japanese naval aviation itself. Among those aboard Hiryu was Admiral Ramon Yamaguchi. Many officers urged evacuation. The situation was hopeless. The carrier could not be saved, but Yamaguchi made a different choice. Like many senior Japanese naval officers of his era, he chose to remain aboard. His Hiryu burned. He stayed with his ship, a decision shaped by duty, by culture, by personal conviction. Eventually, the carrier was abandoned and later scuttled. Yet the imagine remained powerful. One of Japan's finest commanders disappeared with the fleet he had fought so hard to preserve. The era of Japanese naval invincibility was ending, and everyone could feel it. For Admiral Nagumo, the defeat was devastating. Only months earlier, he had commanded the force that attacked Pearl Harbor. His carriers had seemed unstoppable. Now they were gone, destroyed with a single day. The irony was brutal. At Pearl Harbor, Japanese aircraft had crippled American battleships. At Midway, American aircraft crippled Japanese carriers. The weapons that had delivered victory had now delivered defeats. History had come full circle, yet beneath the tactical details lay a deeper lesson, a lesson about assumptions, a lesson about intelligence, a lesson about underestimating an enemy, because one of the crucial mistakes made before Midway involved Yorktown. Japanese intelligence concluded she was finished. The conclusion seemed logical, reasonable, supported by evidence, but it was wrong, and because it was wrong, operational planning incorporated a false reality. The enemy force was stronger than expected. The enemy possessed more aircraft than expected. The enemy had more options than expected. A single mistaken assumption echoed through the battle again and again. The contribution of Yorktown cannot be measured solely by bombs dropped on aircraft launch. Its very presence mattered. Its existence altered the battlefield. Its aircraft participated in the attack. Its fighter defended the fleet. Its crew absorbed enemy attention. Most importantly, Yorktown forced the Japanese to fight a stronger opponent that anticipated. Had the carrier remained in Pearl Harbor, events might have unfolded differently. No one can say exactly how differently. History rarely offers certainty, but Yorktown's return undeniably changed the equation, and that return was only possible because of one extraordinary effort. 72 hours, 3 days, around the clock harbor, more than 1,400 workers, an achievement bordered on the unbelievable. Back at Pearl Harbor, news of the victory arrived gradually. Reports filtered in, then confirmation, then celebration. Workers who had repaired Yorktown learned what had happened. The carrier had reached Midway. The carrier had fought. The carrier had helped secure victory. For many of them, the emotions were overwhelming. Some had barely slept during the repair effort. Some had worked until exhaustion. Now they discovered their labor had contributed directly to one of the most important victories of the war. Their welds, their repairs, their sacrifices, they mattered. History often remembered admirals, it remembers pilots, it remembers famous battle, but behind every victory stand countless people whose name rarely appears in books, the welders, the machinists, the electricians, the repair crews at Midway. Their contribution helped change the course of the Pacific War. Yorktown herself wasn't finished fighting fate. After the battle, salvage effort continued. The carrier stubbornly remained afloat. Teams returned abroad. Hope briefly grew that she might be safe. Then tragedy struck once more. On June 6, the Japanese submarine I-168 slipped through the American screen. Its torpedo found its targets. One destroyer was sunk. Yorktown was hit again. The damage proved fatal. The carrier lingered for another day. Then, on June 7, 1942, USS Yorktown finally slipped beneath the Pacific, gone but not forgotten. Her service at Midway had already secured her place in history. She had arrived when nobody expected her. She had fought when nobody thought she could, and she had helped deliver one of the most important victories ever achieved by the United States Navy. In the years that followed, the Pacific War continued. Many brutal battles remained ahead. The struggle would last more than 3 additional years, but after Midway, the strategic balance began shifting. Japan could still fight, Japan could still inflict terrible damage, yet something fundamental had changed. The initiative was slipping away. The carrier force that spearheaded Japanese expansion had been shattered. The experienced air crews lost at Midway could never be fully replaced. Meanwhile, American industry was only beginning to awaken. New carriers were already under construction, new aircraft were entering production, new pilots were entering training. The balance of power was moving, slowly at first, then relentlessly, and Midway marked the beginning of that transformation. Today, when historians study the battle, they often focus on the dive bombers, the code breakers, the admirals, the dramatic moment when bombs struck carriers' decks, and rightly so, those moments deserve remembrance. But hidden among them is another story, a story about urgency, a story about determination, a story about refusing to accept what seems impossible. After cruelty, experts believe Yorktown would require months of repair. The Japanese believed it, the Americans knew it, the damage report confirmed it. Then reality changed. Workers ignored conventional timelines. Engineers ignored expectations, sailors ignored exhaustions, and together they achieved something extraordinary. They gave a clipper carrier one more chance, just one. That change was enough to surprise Admiral Nagumo, enough to straighten the American fleet, enough to help with Midway, enough to change history. The Japanese had laughed at the idea that the damaged American carrier would return so quickly. By the time they realized their mistake, Yorktown's aircraft were already in the sky, and the fate of the Pacific War was already beginning to turn. As USS Yorktown disappeared beneath the waves, she left behind something far greater than a sinking ship. She left behind a victory that changed the course of the Pacific War, a carrier that was supposed to spend months in dry dock, instead sailed into history, shocked the Japanese fleet, and helped turn Midway into one of the greatest American victories of World War II. Sometimes wars are won not only by admirals and pilots, but by ordinary workers who refuse to quit when the odds seems impossible. And that's exactly what happened at Pearl Harbor in those incredible 72 hours. If you join this story, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to WWII, the short and the story. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next journey into the incredible true stories of history. And speaking of incredible stories, in our next episode we will head to the skies over Nazi-occupied Europe, where experienced Luftwaffe pilots laughed at a huge American fighter they called a flying brick, too heavy, too slow, too clumsy, or so they thought. But when pilots like Robert S. Johnson and Hup Zimk discovered the Thunderbolt's terrifying 500-mile-per-hour dive speed and unleashed 8 devastating .50 caliber machine guns, their so-called flying brick became one of the deadliest predators in the skies. How did a fighter everyone mocked? Because the nightmare of the Luftwaffe. Join us next time for Luftwaffe pilots mocked the P-47 Thunderbolt as a flying brick when it started diving at 500 miles per hour and shielding their formations. Until then, thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep history alive. See you in the next story. Bye bye.